In today's episode of What the Hell in Science, today we're talking about a doctor who infected himself on purpose in the name of science. So, who is this crazy doctor, and why did he think it was a good idea in the first place? In the early 1900s, a physician by the name of Lezener was working in the Yellow Fever Commission in Cuba, studying the transmission and causes of the deadly disease. At the time, it was believed that the virus was spread through contact with contaminated clothing, bedding and other objects. However, Lazier and his colleagues had a theory that mosquitoes might also play a role in the transmission of the disease. This came from a hypothesis in 1881 by Carlos Finlay, who thought that mosquitoes might be to blame for the transmission of such a disease. I mean, yes, even back then he was on the money. It was certainly mosquitoes that made this much worse. However, this was only a theory at the time. We need someone to practically test this, to make sure that our understanding and belief is actually true. So to do this, you literally grab yourself a mosquito, let it bite you, and then see what happens. Look, even if this was my theory, I wouldn't want to do this to myself, because maybe I'm right. But also, by doing this, I could prove myself right, so maybe that's a good reason to do it in the first place. But then I'd get yellow fever and probably die. Double-edged sword, people. A few weeks before he undertook the experiment, he wrote to his wife, proclaiming that he thought he was on track to the real germ. And indeed he was. But was it all worth it at the end of the day? To test this theory, he injected himself with a mosquito that had been fed on the blood of a yellow fever patient. He became ill with the disease and died a few days later, as one might expect from purposely injecting yourself with a deadly disease. His death was a great loss in science, but also an achievement, mainly because it proved the theory that, yes, mosquitoes do transmit yellow fever, and that is a big part of the entire transmission of this deadly disease. Whilst the discovery was reported in scientific journals at the time, the self-injection part was probably not shouted from the rooftops. As a matter of fact, this was a deliberate act that was covered up for quite some time, for reasons unknown, but possibly connected with the family for insurance policies, and the story put about that Lazier had mistaken the mosquito for an uninfected one of a different species. The truth was discovered in 1947 by Philip S. Hench from Lazier's own notebook. However, there were many ethical questions surrounding this experiment. Was it necessary for Lazier to put his own life at risk in this way? Could the same results have been obtained through other means, such as animal testing, for example? Was it morally justifiable for Lazier to conduct an experiment on himself without his colleagues' knowledge or consent? Who the hell knows? But what we do know is that if you want to get the job done right, then you gotta do it yourself. Even if it means injecting yellow fever into you. In the name of science, people. On the one hand, self-experimentation can be seen as a brave and selfless act of scientific curiosity. By subjecting themselves to the same risks and dangers as their subjects, scientists can gain a greater understanding of the phenomena that they're studying. It can also be argued that self-experimentation is a way for scientists to ensure the safety of their subjects, by testing a new treatment or drug on themselves first. They can be confident in its safety before administering it to others. Or before it kills them, in this case. Yes, some see this as reckless and unethical, others think it's a necessary part in our knowledge and development of the scientific field. Whichever way you cut it though, someone somewhere is going to have to take it to allow us to be sure that these theories are correct. As to how we go about doing that, I don't know, I'm not a science guy, but this whole thing is shrouded in controversy. Nevertheless, the self-administered transmission of yellow fever did provide invaluable insight into the transmission of the disease, and paved the way for the development of effective treatments and prevention measures. It is also worth noting that Lazier's colleagues, including Walter Reed and James Carroll, continued his work and eventually discovered the role that mosquitoes play in transmitting the disease. And that's just it. Even though he decided to do this to himself and be ultimately the one that had to take the fall, it was this self-administration that allowed his colleagues to further his work and eventually bring the pieces together. Thankfully, modern medicine has progressed a lot more since this, meaning that we don't actually have to do anything like this anymore, as far as I'm aware. But at the time, if you wanted the job done, then stick it in yourself. Just one last point to add on the end, which I thought was quite interesting, was that AI, or artificial intelligence, has developed to such a point now where it can even theoretically think about what might happen if we were to do something. So without even having to do the test itself, the AI could predict what the outcome would be. Yes, I think I trust an AI more than I would do a doctor that decided to inject himself with yellow fever, but that's just me. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. If you guys liked that video, here's another one just like it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.